There we go. All right. Well, our lesson tonight for our Tuesday Torah study was inspired by a young lady in my Saturday class that asked where she could get information on the meanings of and representations of something came up about brass, and we talked about sin, judgment, redemption, and that kind of thing. So tonight we'll talk about symbolism in the Torah, and this is thoughts on gold, silver, brass, iron, tin, lead, and brick. I know brick's not a metal, but brick kind of has a lot of symbolism that we kind of overlook sometimes. We overlook a lot of things when we just read through it. So,
Yeah.
the metals in scriptures are symbols and types, and we determine what spiritual truth the symbols represent by going to the scriptures to be taught. Now we have to take care when we determine what the representation of symbolism like this teaches us. When we compare it to a lot of the stuff that's been out there, the Bible is very specific on what things represent, and it's night and day from what you would find in what we call the New Age movement nowadays. So what we're going to read is the representations based on what the Torah tells us that these things represent. So this is kind of a topical study of 6 types of metal that we find in the Torah: the iron, tin, lead, brass, silver, and gold. And then we're going to take a very basic consideration of bricks, without a whole lot of elaboration on what bricks mean. But like the numbers that we use to draw more meaning out of scriptures, metals also help us to understand our own condition, both spiritual and carnal, as we seek to know ourselves better throughout our journey, I guess, in building our relationship with Yahuwah, who is our Elohim. So, what are these 6 metals? Gold is probably one of the ones that a lot of people think about more than anything else for some reason. But gold in Torah is a symbol of Elohim. Now, it can also be a symbol of kingship, but it's a symbol of Elohim and how gold connects humankind to Elohim. So we see gold often as something that's overlaying something. Now we're going to take a look at a few scriptures related to gold, and then we'll briefly discuss what these scriptures have to tell us. So let's consider the golden incense altar that we find in Shemot 1 through 3. And those verses tell us, "And you shall make an altar to burn incense upon. Of shittim wood shall you make it. A cubit shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof. 4 shall it be, and 2 cubits shall be the height thereof, and the horn shall be of the same." So there's a lot of measurements in there. But now it says, "And you shall overlay it with pure gold, the top thereof, and the sides thereof, round about, and the horns thereof. And you shall make a crown of gold to go around it." So overlay the whole thing with pure gold. There are several different types of gold mentioned in Torah. Tonight we'll talk about pure gold, and we'll talk about good gold. But in order to get a better understanding of this particular verse, or these verses in Shemot, let's consider a verse out of Revelation 5:8 that says, "When he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 4 and the 20 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of incense, which are the prayers of those who are set apart." And these are people that are set apart to Elohim, set apart to the believers. So let's consider all of these components and see if we can kind of gather an idea together. Shittim, we've considered Shittim in our studies of the ark, that the ark was made out of Shittim wood and it was overlaid in gold. And we found that Shittim, the root of it, literally meant our raw emotions. So this wood, Shittim, is a representation of our carnal being. Now this wood is covered by pure gold, which represents the very anointing of Elohim. So in this we can look at gold as the glory and the spiritual covering that was lost after the transgression. When the Adam was placed outside the Garden of Eden, we find that there was a river that flowed out of Eden and became four heads, and that one of them, called Pishon, surrounded the land of Havilah, where there was gold. This is Bereshit 11 through 12. Now, Pishon means to increase. Havilah means to circle, but it comes from a primitive root meaning to sway back and forth, but it also means to bring forth. And the word for gold is chazav, that also means splendor. But when we look at this verse in Torah, and you can go to your Torah to have it, I have the word here in Hebrew. The word in Torah is chazav, or chazahav, which means the gold. So we're getting more specific about something. And then it tells us that this particular type of gold that was found in the land, that in verse 12 it says, the gold of that land was good. Okay? So if we understand that there's a difference between pure gold and good gold, then good gold is the splendor of Elohim that is hidden within us, and pure gold is the anointing of Yahweh that surrounds us and sets us apart as believers of Yahweh Elohim. That the anointing of Yahweh, Mashiach, is represented by this pure gold that encases Shittim, which is basically us when we are, I guess, in our carnal selves. So what we can take from this is that the water that flows from the realm of Elohim, now this river came out of Eden, that Eden still belongs to Elohim, surrounds us. We are Eretz, the land, and makes us chal, makes us whole and complete. Now, this draws out, it brings forth, there's that word, that root of Havilah, brings forth the good gold, the splendor of Yahweh Elohim that is within us. So when we keep Torah, we become like the golden altar of incense. We are overlaid with pure gold, which is the anointing of Yahweh, and as such, we become set apart to Elohim, and then the smoke of the incense, our prayers and our petitions find their way into the presence of Yahweh Elohim. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, we discussed in detail the Ark of the Covenant and considered how the representation of our heart is found within the Ark. And it represents our heart, this thing that is full of raw emotion. It's Shittim wood that is covered by the anointing of Yahweh, that is being covered by pure gold. And then the cover that finds us, that we find on the ark, is the mercy seat that has the cherubim with the wings pointed towards each other, that forms the seat. That we see in this a representation of our heart covered by the anointing of Yahweh, that being covered by this mercy seat is a place for Elohim to dwell inside of us, as well as his Shekinah that descends on us not only during our prayer time, but if we are walking with our Elohim the way we should be walking with our Elohim, then that Shekinah is on us and indwells in our everyday life, in our day-to-day affairs. Okay? And this is in Shemot 25, 10 through 11, and 25, 17 through 22, that it talks about the ark and its construction. But what we're seeing here is that pure gold overlaying Shittim is a representation of the anointing of Yahweh. But this good gold that was in the land of Havilah, which means to bring out, is a representation of good gold. Everybody has this good gold within them. Whether they go to the Word to allow it to be drawn out or not, that's where the choice begins to happen. Ultimately, it is the very presence of Elohim in all of humankind that allows us to live. And we see this in the taches, I don't know, the clips. We'll say the clips of the curtain of the tabernacle. These are the clips that keep the walls of the tabernacle together. These are made out of gold. The curtains, the walls of the tabernacle were clipped together by these gold, I guess, clip thingies. It says taches, but I'm not, I say taches, most people are looking for something that has cheese in it that you put hot sauce on.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, we find this in Shemot 26:5. Now, when we consider this, without the indwelling of the good gold of Yahweh Elohim, we cannot survive, whether we are a believer or not. Okay? Everybody that exists today has the breath of life from Elohim inside of them, whether you are Jew, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, everybody has the breath of life. It's whether we find our way back to the garden or not that determines where we end up. So, only we, however, can bring the pure gold of Yahweh Elohim, His anointing, His Mashiach, back into our lives. We seek Elohim to live, and we accept His Yeshua in order to go back to the beginning when the anointing of Yahweh covered the Adam, which is a representation of you and I. Okay? We are all descendants of Adam. It was the descendants of Adam that got on the ark. It was the descendants of Adam that got off the ark after the flood. And it was from the descendants of Adam that we all came into being. So let's move on to the next metal, which is silver. Like I said, this is an overview. There are a whole lot more scriptures throughout Torah that talk about gold. But these particular ones kind of show us how we're made in the importance of being surrounded and infilled by our Elohim. So we move on to silver. Hello, Bruce. Silver, which is in here someplace. That represents the redemption and the price of a soul. In Bamidbar 18, 15 through 16, we read about the redemption price for the children of Israel. And this was a price paid by all the children of Israel ages 20 and up. And we also read in Vayikra 5, 15, and 16 about the trespass offering that could be paid in silver. If you didn't want to pay it in livestock, you could pay it in silver. These two payments in silver were for the redemption of the people. And this silver was cleaned through smelting in order to make the sockets on which the tabernacle was supported. They made these little cups out of silver. And the poles would fit in these little cups. And on those, the curtains would be clipped with either brass, which we'll talk about in a minute, or gold, there's that taco word, clips, to hold it in place. So, but this silver was made to make the sockets on which the tabernacle was supported. Shemot 26:19, Shemot 30:12 through 16 tells us about this particular offering, and it talks about these particular sockets that were made. Now, the interesting thing about this particular silver is that it was given voluntarily. Okay? Nobody forced anybody to give any of it. It was given voluntarily. We must want to be redeemed, but it is upon redemption that our existence depends for its support. We have to want to be redeemed, but without being redeemed, our existence is basically like dust. It's here and then it's gone. So it's very important. We look at the smelting process that occurs when we give ourselves over to be redeemed through Yahshua. It says, one who comes will baptize you or mikvah you or immerse you with the Ruach HaKodesh and fire. So there's a smelting process that goes through in order to be redeemed, delivered, and restored by Yahweh. It is Elohim's correction that takes place in the smelting process. This process separates, and we're going to kind of touch on two other sources of metals, but this process, this smelting process, separates the lead deposits. Lead represents our heaviness of heart and weakness from the silver ore, thus leaving the silver pure. This is an expression of judgment upon basically the depravity that keeps us separated from Elohim. It's iniquity that keeps us separated from Elohim. Not keeping his word, not following his Torah, not doing according to his will, but according to our will. And this keeps us separated from Elohim. So this melting process brings that to the surface. This is an expression of judgment upon the depravity that keeps us separated from Elohim. In this connection, brass and iron are also regarded as the dross of silver. And we'll read that in just a second. Unpolished brass and iron are both corrupters. They represent sin. They represent corruption. They represent bondage. Okay? If we consider Psalms 12:6, which says, the words of Yahweh are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace, then we can consider that the word of Yahweh Elohim, it's this word that cleans us. It is the blood of Yahshua that separates these impurities of unpolished brass and iron by removing them from our lives in this smelting process. Our believing and receiving the word of Yahweh Elohim and the gift of Yahshua. There is also, according to the prophets, a type of self-righteous self-redemption that's called reprobate silver that represents the reprobate state of humankind, which is a type of reverence but with no real belief. And we read about this in 2 Timothy chapter 3, I believe, where it says that there will be all these different types of people who have a type of reverence, a type of righteousness, but they deny the power of Elohim. So there's no solid belief system there. You can believe in God all you want. You can believe in Jesus all you want, but that's all you get. You get something that has absolutely no meaning. Okay? And that upsets a lot of people when I say that. But we understand that Yahshua means something. Yahweh means something. Jesus and God are simply names of deities that have been placed, that have been used to cover the face of Yahweh. Breaking the second commandment that says, don't put a face over my face. So that's kind of a different story, but we kind of understand. Jeremiah 6:28 through 30 basically tells us the same thing as this verse, or these verses in Timothy tell us, and it also tells us basically the same thing that